Hey, so the comedian Hasan Minhaj is in the news a lot this week. Turns out some of the stories he told in his comedy were not quite accurate. It is raising the question, how much are comedians allowed to stretch the truth? Today on the podcast, the group chat is here. We are getting into it. Let's go. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Honestly, I love this day. I love this day because I get to gather the group chat and talk about the biggest stories in pop culture this week. For this one, the group chat is all comedians. Okay, John Cullen is here. Cassie Cao is here. Brandon Ash-Mohammed is here. What's good, everybody? Welcome to Commotion. How's everyone feeling this morning? Hello, hello, hello.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hello.
Love
What's
this energy.
up?
This is great. This is exactly the energy that I was looking for. Okay, we're going to start with this Hasan Minhaj story because it is a huge deal. I'm going to set it up for the audience for a moment, okay? Basically, there was a big New Yorker piece digging into the veracity of Hasan Minhaj's stand-up. It's not a normal thing to do. We don't normally fact-check comedians, but Hasan Minhaj, I think, is not just any comedian. He's one of the biggest comedians around right now. You know, he hosted Netflix's Patriot Act, which was basically like a millennial take on Jon Stewart's thing of blending politics and comedy. But B, and maybe more importantly, the thing that made his stories really land is that when he tells a story about, like, I don't know, racism in America, he pairs it with a very personal, direct anecdote. The New Yorker's piece kind of made it clear that some of those have been, let's say, greatly embellished. That's the setup. That's the setup of us going into this conversation. Maybe, Brenda, I'll start with you on this one. Before we dig into the story, can we just give our listeners some perspective on why Hasan Minhaj is so important in the world of comedy right now?
I think part of the reason why Hasan is so important right now is, I don't know, like, he's just like that girl. Really?
Yeah.
He is like,
on.
I've seen him perform before. He's like a fresh, like, again, yeah, one of the voices. I've seen him perform a bunch live. He just has a perspective, especially with a lot of things that are happening with Islamophobia in North America, Canada, US. He is the person that is always there and has been at the forefront and kind of the voice of a lot of Muslims, and a lot of Muslims look up to him. And
yes.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of those people in terms of, like,
No.
you know, big Muslim comedians. It's like there are two, maybe three, you know? And so he's sort of one of those big shining stars. I mentioned the embellishments that Hasan Minhaj has been accused of. I want to play you guys this bit from his 2022 Netflix special. This is from The King's Gesture.
I was 16 years old. It's 2002. I'll never forget this. So I'm a junior. And during fourth period, my dad pulls me out of school and he takes me to Friday prayer. And I'm in the back of the mosque. And in the middle of the sermon, this super ripped white guy shows up to the mosque. Just bald, all trap, no neck, barbed wire tattoo. Dude, he looked roided out. He's just like, hi, I'm Brother Eric. I'm here to convert to Islam. And my dad's like, Hasan, you see that? It's a miracle. That's the power of Islam. I'm like, Dad, Eric is a federal agent.
I remember loving this bit. Like, I remember having a really big reaction to watching this bit because it was really, you know, just a really funny thing that I heard. But in that recent New Yorker piece, you know, we get this confirmation that this FBI informant, Brother Eric, he's not a real person. He's actually a real person, but he never went to Minhaj's Sacramento mosque. He was in a completely different area of California. We also hear in that special, I think, this like devastating story. He shares a story about how he had to rush his daughter to hospital because they received, you know, this anthrax envelope at his house, and he was really worried about it. And some of it fell on his daughter, fell on the stroller, touched her shoulder. They're like, okay, we gotta go. We gotta take her to the hospital. And then we learn, you know what? He did receive a letter with some unidentified powder. His daughter never touched it. She was never taken to the hospital. Cassie, when you hear those revelations, what goes through your mind?
I mean, to be honest with you, I just feel like if you're going to be making up stories, like, you should be making up cooler ones. I just think, look, they're fine. They're fine. Like, I think what he says about preserving the emotional truths behind these stories is valid, and especially at the level that he's working at and with the demands of putting out material that he's at, I think it's at this point, like kind of expected that he would be conflating some stories or putting some things together that didn't actually happen anymore. But I think if you're going to have a team of writers at your disposal, like come up with something snazzier than some anthrax, you know?
For Cassie, the anthrax is not serious enough. I will say, John, like watching that story in the special about anthrax falling on his daughter's shoulder is not told for comedic effect. Like it is the part of the special where everyone holds their breath and goes, you get a bit of shock. Later, he sort of like releases that tension and you get that catharsis. But when he's doing that, he's not doing that for being like, hey, here's like a funny part that I'm trying to tell. Do you find that there's like a gap between the way that he says he's using these emotional truths that are not real truths and what actually happened? Like, is there any excuse for this, do you think?
I mean, I guess there's an excuse for it in the sense that, like, kind of what you said off the top, no one is going to a comedy show thinking, you know what, this guy, everything better be true up there, or I'm never coming back. You know, I don't think anybody necessarily expects that out of a comedian, but I do think on some level, when the story becomes a little more serious, where it's my daughter was hospitalized and, you know, I had this very, interesting and emotional experience connected to my religion. I don't know. I do think there is a bit more of a sort of not duty, but I think when you're sort of known as this guy that people believe is this kind of, you know, truth telling, he's like you said, there's 2 or 3 people who are doing this. So like, maybe on some level, you do owe your audience a little bit more of the truth.
Brandon, you look like you're about to chime in there. Did you want to add something to that?
Oh, it was just like, it's interesting because I remember when I saw him perform this live and he was telling the brother Eric story. Yeah. And I was like, this is crazy. This is wild. Let me Google this. So then I remember Googling it in the middle of the show and being like, oh shit, this is the actual man. This actually happened to him. Oh my God. He's been through so much.
Do you feel differently now that it's like, okay, this did happen, but it's someone else?
Oh my God, I've been bamboozled. The trickery.
I mean, those are the stakes, right? The stakes is like, oh, Hasan Minhaj is like our guy. He's the person who's been through all the things we've been through. And it turns out he's actually just kind of like, I don't know, distilling some of the stories that he's heard out there, I guess for comedic effect, but also, does he have the license to do that, Cassie, do you think?
Personally, I think the fact that Brother Eric was a real guy somewhere else in California, I'm like, that's amazing. It's like cool
that's
that
already
I get to
credit.
hear about it. I think that's like truthful enough for me. I'm like, I don't need him to have gone to Hasan Minhaj's mosque if he was in just like the neighboring mosque. I don't think it takes away from that story for me personally. I'm like, cool that he told it to us.
Cassie's just showing up being like, lie to me. It is fine. I am not. That is totally.
I want to have a good time. And if you are telling me an emotional truth, I'll take it. I'll run home with it. Like, to me, I'm not a fan of Hasan Minhaj because he's telling me the nitty gritty truth of his personal life. Like, I want to know about how he feels on an emotional level about being Muslim in America and about what that experience is. And he's trying to represent such a large group of South Asians, and you know what I mean? Like, he's doing a lot of work. He's covering a lot of ground for a lot of people.
I just on the vein of, you know what, lie to me, that is fine. Among the many people who are defending Hasan Minhaj is the fellow comic and legend Whoopi Goldberg. Here's what she said on The View earlier this week about comedians making up stories.
That's what we do. That's what we do. We tell stories and then we embellish them. You have to understand, a lot of it is not the exact thing that happened, because why would we tell exactly what happened? It ain't that interesting.
John, does she have a point there? And how pervasive is this practice in the world of comedy in terms of, you know, being like, there's going to be many lies that we tell today?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Cassie was talking about sort of, she wants to hear about Hasan's lived experience as an Islamic man in America. As the white guy on this panel, my emotional truths are a little bit more like, oh, my mom didn't give me gushers in my lunch today. Oh no, this is horrible.
Oh no.
So for me, it's a little bit like I do have to make stuff up because I lived on a street with where you could play hockey and it was fine and no problem. So yeah, I mean, I think Whoopi's certainly right? Like, I mean, there is always, even if you're telling mostly the truth as a comedian, there's always a creative license that you're going to be taking to rope the audience in and to make them interested. So yeah, I mean, certainly that is true of almost all comedy, I think.
Just out of curiosity, John, do you have an example of like a moment where you're like, I'm just going to embellish. I'm just going to just tell a straight up lie because it's just better for the bit?
Well, I would never lie to my audience.
Of course, you're a stand-up man. Yes, of course.
I am. No, but I do have this one joke. It's I'm more of a storytelling comedian. So I have this one joke and it's about 10 minutes long and I talk about getting my appendix out.
Yeah.
And I talk specifically about the surgeon and I say, the surgeon came in wearing a bike helmet and bike shorts and sweating profusely. And I was like, this is the guy that's going to take out my appendix. Like, the surgeons have gotten too comfortable in this country. And that didn't happen to me, but it happened to my ex, who was my current girlfriend at the time. So when I got my appendix out, my surgeon he just came in bootcut jeans and loafers, which I also didn't appreciate. But I thought it was a little funnier when the guy who was doing the surgery on my ex's ACL came in sweating profusely like, which knee are we operating on today? It was like, what the heck? What's going on? How is this allowed?
All right, I will allow it. I just want to return Brandon to Hasan Minhaj for a moment. He doesn't deny a lot of these accusations that are made about his act. He just says that phrase that Cassie mentioned earlier, that he's going for the emotional truth of his story. So in that sense, yeah, he wasn't the target of an actual FBI sting, but he says, the story is an authentic representation of what it feels like to be a brown Muslim man in America post 9/11. Do you think that intention matters? Do you think that intention matters more than the actual truth? Because you said you felt bamboozled.
Well, I feel like at some levels he didn't necessarily have to be like, it's happened to me. Because I mean, like Chris Rock has stories.
Very different.
Yeah, Chris Brown has some stories. Chris Rock has stories where he talks about like things that have happened in the news, but he's talking about it as like things that happens in the news, and it has to do with the Black experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like it didn't necessarily have to be that far, but ultimately Hasan delivered. Hasan, he is quite the actress, the actor. I was like, Meryl Streep, step aside. Viola Davis, step aside. Need to get Hasan an Oscar because that was a performance. I was emotional. Get him an award. He gets the EGOT.
You're not lying. Like in that moment when he's talking about his daughter and the anthrax scare, I don't know if it's just like the way the special was filmed or what, but like he looked like he was welling up a little bit. But I got it. So in that sense, totally, I guess, Oscar for Hasan. Do you feel like comedians of color are held to a different standard than white comedians in the sense of like having to go ahead?
I think so.
I think so. I think a lot of the time, a critique that I have gotten has been that I'm not vulnerable enough.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time they're kind of like, okay, we need to hear your trauma. Where's your trauma?
Yes.
Like, we're not allowed to just be like silly and goofy. We have to like be like, ooh, what happened to you? What made you this way? And I feel like Hasan definitely has to, deal with that and keep up with that. It's just like, how much can you draw from your actual experience that's actually happened to you when you're having to make specials all the time? So it's just like, eventually you're like, I got to keep up with the demand for trauma. Let me go find some other trauma.
Cassie, you were going to say something.
I think that's so true. When I started stand-up, I wanted to be like a cute observational comic. I wanted to be like, have you heard about what's going on with airplane food? And absolutely nobody wanted to hear that stuff from me. Nobody gave at all what I care about. Like, oh, do you know about fountains and statues? Nobody cared until I was like, you know how it sucks to be an Asian girl dating white guys? And everybody was like, more of that, please. And now I have a career about it. Yeah. So no, absolutely. Nobody lets you just be cute. I think one of the nice things about being a white guy is you're like, we all know that I got nothing else going on. Let's talk about shirts. And they let you do 20 minutes on socks. Have you seen Seinfeld? I don't get to do 20 minutes on socks.
Yeah.
My 20 minutes on socks is unbelievable. It is my best. A lot of people say it's my best material. I might make a whole album out of it.
The struggle of your socks.
But okay, first of all, I want to hear your bit about fountains and statues. So I want to come back to that at a later moment, Cassie.
Thank you.
Of course, there's room for this. But there's something to be said about the fact that Hasan Minhaj was not just, he was delivering trauma by like the truckload. I mean, this is a guy who was is playing off the news, right? Like he takes the news and he turns it into comedy. That's the thing that made him famous. It's a thing that, you know, where he started The Daily Show. Do you think that changes our relationship with, you know, trusting him, John? Do you think like that raises his standard in terms of having to be at least somewhat accurate, because he started in this world where he's like, I'm taking the real world and I'm making it into real news and real politics and making it into comedy? Does that change our relationship to him, do you think?
Well, I think to touch on one of your points, I do think it is something he's going to think about for sure, right? Like this is definitely moving forward. He's going to think about it, and maybe similar to kind of what Cassie's experience was talking about, where, or what she was talking about, where, you know, he's now going to feel like, oh shoot, I've been outed. I've been on the spot. Like I'm going to have to make sure my next special is a little closer to the truth. Maybe if he cares, I don't know, but most comedians do tend to take that kind of stuff to heart,
right?
You know, but it's going to be interesting to see where he goes from here. Because I do think like I said before, I think on some level you owe your audience at least part of the truth when the story is so emotional and so, you know, you're presenting it as so close to you. I think you do owe the audience a little bit of truth in that moment. As Brandon said, you don't want to feel bamboozled, you know, and I think to say, well, this is my emotional truth is like, that's probably true, but also like, at least for me anyway, I would not want to go home and Google the bits and then go, oh, okay, really, huh? That's, you know, that would take the some of my enjoyment of the show away. I think.
Cassie, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think that it's worth mentioning that there's a bit of a difference in terms of like the format of what Hasan's doing on Netflix, which is that it's not pure stand-up. What he's delivering are solo shows that are about personal storytelling, which do actually have a bit of a difference. Hasan obviously does do stand-up. He does stand-up in clubs all the time. No, probably not anymore since he's gotten super big, but he was never that successful at doing stand-up, and I would imagine that he wasn't embellishing his stories to this degree. Like when we do stand-up, our bits are short, our jokes are small. There's not really a lot of impetus to be putting such a heavy burden on anything that you say within a stand-up context, whereas these solo shows are very much like in the realm of theater, where this practice is a lot more. Like it happens a lot more than we're saying as comedians. Like I wouldn't make up a story because there's no reason for me to. But if I was carrying an hour show that needed to have an emotional dip at the end of Act 2, like you would need something weighty in there.
Brandon, maybe last word to you on this one, because I imagine there's a range of reactions to this Hasan Minhaj story, from the Whoopi Goldberg, it's fine, we make stuff up, to people who are saying, you know what, I'm really hurt. I'm really hurt because I trusted you. You were my guy. You were the person that I trusted their worldview, but also trusted that these things specifically happened to you, and I'm hurt by this. Do you think that this is going to affect his career going forward? He's one of the names who keep being bandied about for The Daily Show to replace Trevor Noah, for example. What do you think will come of this for Hasan Minhaj?
I feel like if he doesn't like acknowledge it more, like if he doesn't do, like if in his new special he doesn't do a bit about it, or like take the punch out of everyone before everyone calls him a liar or whatever, then it will affect his career. But right now it's like it's his game and he's got to like handle it and make jokes about it, or he will lose his power.
Well, we will wait to see what happens. I'm so curious about this. If people are just tuning in, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. You're listening to Commotion right now. With me are comedians Cassie Cao, John Cullen, and Brandon Ash-Mohammed. Listen, I would like to talk about a comedy that is getting a lot of praise.
Hi everyone, I'm Otis Milburn. I'm new here, I'm with the whole Mordell secondary team. Thank you. I just wanted to let you know a little bit about myself. I spend a lot of my free time thinking about sex.
That is from Sex Education, which has become one of Netflix's most popular shows over the past few years. It just returned for a 4th season this week. It is about teens at a school in the UK who are trying to figure out intimacy and sexuality. Cassie, listen, you're someone who works in comedy and TV writing. What do you think it is about Sex Education that sets it apart from like a typical sort of teen comedy show?
Well, I think that people really love this show. Yeah. People are really into this show.
I'm people. You can say even me. I'm
also people.
Yes, we are people. Yeah. Yes, let's go.
I think personally what I think about it is that it talks about such like intimate, like salacious, like sex kind of details
Mhm.
that normally shows would like scandalize or glorify, but
Like,
in fact the tone of this show is like very wholesome, and they blend in a lot of friendship stories and like positive relationships between everyone. I think
Yeah.
that's such a nice mix. It's got a real Ted Lasso kind of vibe to a topic that could be very that could go another way. I think that juxtaposition is really refreshing for everyone to see.
That's true. Like it kind of even treats like the darkness parts of people's like fetishes, you know, in like in a really earnest way. And it kind of makes it feel like a very welcoming space. John, we should say you used to be a high school teacher. What do you think the show gets right about the high school experience that other shows don't?
Well, I mean, I think most kids live in a beautiful home on a river in the middle of England, and they all go to a boarding school. So
They
I
do.
think it gets that right. The first right off the hop, I think, you know, kind of nails that sort of lived experience for most of us.
Of course.
But no, I think what it gets right, I think, is just, and Cassie was kind of alluding to this, is sort of the confusion of, you know, around sexuality at that age. You know, everybody's kind of trying to figure themselves out and figure out maybe where on the spectrum they are, if they're, you know, if they're LGBTQ plus or whatever. I think the show deals with those issues very well, and in a way that I think is a little, it's not played so much for oh, I'm just having this revelation, and I like, it's not, it's like one episode I'm straight, and the next episode, oh my God, I'm gay and I've figured it all out, and everything is happy and we've got it. You know, like it really deals with these characters going through like figuring it all out. And it's not easy when you're a teenager, right? Like lots of stuff's running through your brain. And so I think that's a, you know, part of the show I think really nails it, is it's a very fluid, like sexuality is, very fluid look at like what a lot of these characters are going through. And I think that's very true to real life.
Brendan, I think the one thing that I'm really struck by is the fact that this season, this fourth season of Sex Education, it's a final season of the show, is landing on a week when there have been protests in this country and counter-protests in this country from people who have very strong feelings about who should be the people to educate children and young people about sex and about the questions that they have about sex. And to me, the thing that Sex Education gets right is at the end of the day, kids just want to know, and they will find out, figure out ways to know, maybe ways that you don't want them to know. So as a result, maybe you want trusted figures to be the people to pass down information about sex. But were you thinking about the relationship between sex education and those protests this week?
I was just like, oh damn, what weird
timing.
Weird timing. I was like, you know, as a teen, a little teen.
As a young teen.
I was like, as a young teen, I was just like, oh my God, this show is about my life, what I'm going through. My mom is also Gillian Anderson. And I don't know. It's just like, it's so like interesting how like, was it serendipitous that the timing of everything has happened. And it's like also like, yeah, like us find like, as like, I remember as a child, nobody would tell me anything, but I would just like find books in the library and I would just take them out and I would read. So it's just like the kids are going to find out anyway. It's like,
and Sex Education is exactly a show about how the kids are going to find out anyway. I think it deals with it so intelligently. Okay, before I let each of you go, it is now my opportunity to ask you for a recommendation to take forth into my life. What do you want to recommend? Cassie, I'll start with you.
If you're in Toronto, I would like to recommend the JFL festival that's happening in town.
Just for Laughs festival, hey? Yes.
Yes, Just for Laughs. There's going to be comedy shows all over the city. I'm going to be in them, at parties. Just there's so much comedy going around. I'm opening for Jay Jordan on Sunday night at Comedy Bar, so come find me if you want. But also him, he's great.
Delightful.
But me, mostly.
Brandon Ash-Mohammed, what would you like to recommend?
Okay, well, if you're plugging your JFL 40 Toronto shows, I'm gonna plug mine. I am going to be doing a show at the Elgin Theater called Trinidad versus Jamaica. I'm representing Trinidad. It is going to be on Sunday. Y'all are gonna love it. I also recommend Rosie O'Donnell's podcast.
What?
Have you heard it?
No. Is this the first time?
A podcast where she like interview. It's like her show, and she does little like Q&As after each episode. But she just had Kathy Griffin on, and it was really interesting.
Brandon, this is the first time I've heard somebody say the name Rosie O'Donnell in so long. Like it's been so long. Maybe that's on me. Maybe that's my fault.
Look, the gays keep up with Rosie. So I don't know. You need to go keep up.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's how you're right. This is completely
That's
on
on
me.
you.
That's on me. I wear it. I will own it. And John, I understand that you have a song on heavy rotation. Let's actually hear a little bit of the song.
But don't blame me, blame Brett. Blame my ex, blame my ex, blame my ex. Don't blame me, blame Brett. Blame my ex, blame my ex, blame my ex.
John, what's going on here? This is Blame Brett from the Toronto band The Beaches. Why is this song?
Very, very fun. All girl / non-binary group. And I just love this song. It's hilarious. And the lead singer of The Beaches is like, my ex is Brett, the lead singer of the Glorious Sons, and I don't like him. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's going beyond the scope of what you need to provide as far as biographical details. And I love that. And it's catchy as hell. The whole album's great. Blame My Ex, The Beaches.
I guess I will do the honors of just plugging all of you. Guys, go listen to the comedy of Brandon Ash-Mohammed, of John Cullen, Cassie Cao. I appreciate all of you being on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you.
Cassie Cao and Brendan Ash-Mohammed are comedians based in Toronto, and John Cullen joined us from Calgary. And that is it for the show today. But listen, before we go, I just wanted to tell you about the amazing team that helped get this show on the air. Commotion is produced by Stuart Berman, Ty Callender, Gene Kim, Jess Lowe. Our digital producer is Amelia Ekbal. Our director today is Jane Vancouverden. Our engineer this week and for the past couple of weeks has been Gabby Hagorilis. Gabby, you're a star. Thank you. The senior producers this week are John Perry and Danielle Grogan. Anne McKeegan is our executive producer. If you missed anything from this week on Commotion, I highly, highly recommend you go back and find it. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. And also, you can find it on YouTube now if that's what you'd like. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. I'm going to be here next week. So if you're going to be here, I think we should hang out again. Should we do that? Let's do it.